Welcome to Reflecting Light. This podcast is about filling the world with light by exploring myth, ancient texts, scripture, great works of world literature, and the works of artists, past and present, for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. And now, here is your host, Mandy Green.
Hello, my beautiful listeners. Welcome to Reflecting Light. It's great to be back and have you back with me. Thank you to all of you who have emailed. Gia, I got your donation today. Thank you for that. It was just timely and heartfelt, and I'm grateful for all of you who support the podcast. We are getting going, and things will start. I just want to warn you, though, I will be traveling a lot this fall. I have 2 big, huge trips coming up, and I'm trying to load the queue before I go, but I've had a few setbacks. I had a tooth removed last week. Tooth pain is the worst. I think that is the worst part of mortality, hands down, and I have terrible teeth. So trying to recover from that and still speak, and I will be gone for a lot of that time. So never fear. I just want to warn you that I'm trying to load the queue and hopefully there's no interruption. But if there happens to be an interruption sometime in October or November when I'm out traveling, don't fear. It will just be a week. I think it will only be a week. And then we'll be right back. I'll be back in town and we'll get going again. So thanks for your patience with that. I try to be as consistent as humanly possible. And yet that's the human part of the equation, right? All the things we don't plan on that seem to come and afflict us. So that's on the docket. Again, thanks for being here with me. Thanks for helping with season 3. We're still needing help. So if any of you would like to make a donation, that would be great. All right. Today, I want to share a love story with you. I thought about starting with Shakespeare, 2 houses, but then I thought that's too much. But this is a love story you're probably not as aware of. It's in your Bible. It's in 2 Chronicles 9 and in 1 Kings chapter 10. Same exact text, so you could read with me from either one of those. I was recently called as a Sunday school teacher in my congregation, and I'm excited about that, wondering how I can share some of those insights with those of you who follow the Come Follow Me format, maybe like a subscription or something, but I'd probably just do it once a month and just give you some background for understanding what's there. I don't know. It's still on the table, so if you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear them. Anyway, great love story. I'm not sure we're as familiar with it, but I happen to be I'm very taken with this love story between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Now, the Queen of Sheba is spelled Shin Bet Aleph. That's the root there. And if you change that last letter, which really just is a placeholder for the vowel, it becomes the number 7. And so I can't help but wonder if there isn't some wordplay here on the Queen of Sheba or Sheba. I don't see the dot in the bet, so it'd be Sheba in Hebrew. But beside the point, Sheba is the word for number 7. And 7 is a deeply significant number. As we all know, 7 means completeness, wholeness, fullness. The festivals, the weeks, the years, they all are tied to the number 7. If you look at occurrences of words even, they happen to be multiples of 7. And so 7, if we want to look at it in an idea of celestial progression, according to the ascension of Isaiah and the apocalypse of Abraham and some of these older texts, the books of Enoch, that there are 7 heavenly levels. So who is this Queen of Sheba? Is she someone who's gone through the initiatory rites and the rituals up through level 7? Is she a 7th heaven type of person? Lots of great questions for me about this. I don't have any answers, but the fact that that's her name tells me there's something really magnificent and significant about this woman, and that she's very spiritually advanced, would be my conclusion, just based on the language. We also know that Solomon is also very spiritually advanced, that he comes from this lineage, and that he prays for wisdom. Wisdom is the gift of the Queen of Heaven, right? It's one of her titles is wisdom. And so we have this idea of Solomon being blessed with wisdom. It's my reading, and this is just Mandy Midrash, but that he's the one who, to quote maybe the Jedi, brings balance to the Force. He's the one who's going to bring this femaleness up in equal partnership with this maleness. And that's why he's able to build the temple. He's able to do these rituals, and they're efficacious because you've got the male and the female components. And he prays for wisdom. And so there's this very feminine thread that goes throughout this whole story. And the Queen of Sheba seems to be someone who is versed in tradition, in ritual, in a spiritual maturity in her soul that merits this discussion she's going to have with King Solomon. I think it's a beautiful love story. I want us to throw out our current paradigms of maybe what things should look like or have to look like, and just look at an ancient story here today. We begin reading, and again, this is 2 Chronicles 9, 1 through 12. Or if you want to look in 1 Kings 10, 1 through 12 or 13, you're welcome to as well. Now the Queen of Sheba, when she heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of Yahweh, she came to test him with hard questions. Now to test or to try or to prove him with hard questions. Now, I would think these are questions like what Hugh Nibley calls the terrible questions. Who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? And so she has these very deep questions in her heart. Verse 2, and she came to Jerusalem with this mighty, I mean, the word here is hayil, like in a mighty, great display, with a heavy, great display that bore camels and spices and lots of gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she spoke with him about all that was in her heart. So first of all, she's going to come with this huge retinue, right? Prince Ali, this type of display. And yet the part she really was most interested in was the inner part. She brought a soul that had been cultivated and that had beautiful questions to ask and a sincere desire to know. And I love this line here in verse 3. And Solomon told her all her questions. He answered all of her questions. And there was not anything concealed for the king that he could not explain it to her. Or he didn't conceal anything from her. There was nothing he kept hidden. He didn't pull any punches. He didn't shy away from the answer. He didn't talk to her differently because she was a woman. There's a lot of ways you could read that verse, but I happen to love the manner in which he answered her. In verse 4, and when the Queen of Sheba had seen all of Solomon's wisdom and the house that Solomon had built and the food on his table and the sitting of his servants and the service of his waiters and their apparel and his cupbearers and his entry. And this would be, I would actually translate that as his ascent. by which he went up unto the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. Maybe this is a way of saying it took her breath away. It knocked the wind out of her. And I think in addition to, well, there's a lot going on in these verses. Let's not read over it so fast. When she had seen his wisdom, his mind, and his manner, she was impressed. But that didn't just begin and end with Solomon. She saw that he had blessed that in the way his table was set, in his servants, in his waiters, his cupbearers, the apparel, the way he designed the temple of the Lord. The beauty and the wealth went out from Solomon and blessed all of Israel. It wasn't just confined to him. And I think maybe there's some ZZ Top reference here when she watches him make his ascent up to the house of the Lord. Every girl's crazy about a sharp-dressed man. I mean, maybe there's an ancient precedent for this, that women love to see men decked out in suits, because when she sees him acting as the king and the priest, the Melech and the king of righteousness, the Tzedek, and the priest, she has no more spirit in her. She sees that he is the real deal. And he probably looks magnificent, making that grand entry up into the house of the Lord, behaving and acting as the high priest. He's in this very spiritual frame of mind, and he's acting as the king and the priest, which is a type of Jesus Christ. It really just takes her breath away. I think that's just such a beautiful way of saying that. Continuing on, verse 6, she says to the king, "Truly, it is a true report that I heard in mine own land of your acts and your wisdom. However, I did not believe the words until I came and saw with mine own eyes. And indeed, half wasn't told to me. Your wisdom and your prosperity exceeds everything that I've heard." Really, they aren't even saying half of how magnificent you are. Now, maybe that's because she had this personal audience with him as well, but he not only meets expectations, he exceeds expectations. Just thinking of those cheesy surveys we get in the mail, right? So it wasn't even half told of which I had heard. And then she said, "Blessed are your men and happy are your servants." Now the word here is ashri, which comes from the root asher, which is the title of the Queen of Heaven, Asherata, or her daughter Asherah. And so there's this play on words here. When we say blessed and happy, that's the word there in Hebrew, that they're blessed with this heavenly mother, that they're blessed with this guidance of wisdom, that she's an equal participant with this divine masculine knowledge and priestliness that takes place. All of that has to be in place for the temple to be perfectly functioning the way it is. So there's this beautiful wordplay on Asheri, your men, and Asheri, your servants. In the way of the goddess, they are blessed and happy. That comes from her, because Solomon is full of wisdom, isn't he? These who stand before you continually and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord thy God, which delighteth in thee, to set thee on the throne of Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, therefore he made thee king to do judgment and justice. What a beautiful idea that Solomon was made king out of love for Israel. Again, love is what propelled him to that throne. Remember who his parents are, David and Sheba. Remember, there's that Sheba. You could also say she's the daughter of the covenant. And so there's much more going on here than we learn about. There's much more than David always saw this lady and he did the wrong thing and she did the wrong thing. There's a lot of that story I'm guessing we don't know. because love is this beautiful thread that goes through this whole story here. Well, blessed is Yahweh who delights to put you on the throne because he loves Israel. And she sees the prosperity that not only Solomon's blessed with, but that radiates down into the kingdom. This is a very strong ancient idea that the king's light that's generated with the queen is actually what blesses the kingdom. It's like the sun, and the rays go out from the sun and are directed to everyone in the kingdom. The New Year's rites, all of that has to do with this idea of perfect union and prosperity from the king and queen. Well, she's so overcome. Verse 10, she gave the king 120 talents of gold. Some current estimates are that that's about over $1 million. That is not chump change, my friends. And spices of a very great store. In Isaiah, I was just translating Isaiah 60, where it talks about bringing gold and frankincense from Sheba. Now, frankincense and myrrh are very costly spices, and they're used in temple ritual. They're used for anointing. They're used for different rites. And so notice what she's giving him. She's giving him things that would enhance the temple, that could be used in the temple to support him in this role. So a great store of spices and precious stones. Never came such abundance of spices as these which the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. It's an unprecedented. It's an abundance. Again, look at this remarkable woman who just gives of her abundance. And you'll see that Solomon is going to return in kind. What an amazing relationship. We can make our own conjectures about what kind of a love story this is, but the love exists on many different levels. The Lord's love for Israel, the Lord's love for Solomon's, the Queen of Sheba's love for Solomon as a king and a priest. And you're going to see his love to grant her anything she asks, and how these prototypes can teach us about our relationship with the Lord and with wisdom, and how the fullness is actually what creates more abundance. And as we are in abundant relationships, that light and that love shines out. No one's ever given to the degree that the Queen of Sheba has given. Let's continue reading. And of the ships of Hiram, which brought gold from Ophir and wood, almugim. Now, that's plenty in great quantities, and precious stones. Well, these almug trees, the only place you can find them is in reference to the Queen of Sheba. That's the only time I can see it. So there's some speculation that these are sandalwood trees. They're one of a kind. And she freely gives him lots of these trees in addition to many precious stones. Verse 12, and the king made of the almug trees pillars for the house of the Lord, and for the king's house harps also, and psalteries for singers. There came no such almug trees, nor were any seen to this day. They've never seen the like again. Well, trees have a lot to do with the temple, don't they? With pillars, with gateways. There's a lot to unpack there, but know that a tree is a symbol for a lot of beautiful things. Well, continuing on, verse 13, King Solomon gave unto the Queen of Sheba all her desire, all she desired. Well, in extra biblical texts, we can read about the queen wanting a son. She wants a son in the type and image of King Solomon. And it's said that King Solomon granted her that wish. He gave her a son. Because after that it says, beside that which Solomon gave to her of his royal bounty. So the one thing she desired was something she couldn't get from anyone or anywhere else, was this son in the likeness and image of the father she wanted to be the father of her son. This beautiful idea. Now, I know this is just an idea, but the Ethiopic church is actually very, very strong, and they still hold a piece of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. And so I think there's some evidence to this day of ties that were formed that are lasting somehow. Now, that's just Mandy Midrash. Again, we're reading a love story. You can do what you want with it. But her heart's greatest desire was to have a son. And it was said that Solomon gave her that. In addition, he gave her of his royal bounty. He reciprocated in kind. And then she turned and went to her own country, she and her servants. So it's not a happily ever after in the traditional sense of everything works out great and everything is perfect. But I would have to imagine that this exchange really changed the course of the world. It changed the course of things for both of them and for their people. This idea of the restoration of the feminine with the masculine. This was a time of unprecedented prosperity and joy, and they each have their obligations. They each have a country to rule over. That was understood, and it wasn't this idea of, our current idea of having to always be together, but this tremendous respect and love that they have for each other as a king and queen. We could also look at this as a story that would teach us about the bride caps and the bridegroom caps, and about the restoration of all good things, about the kingdom of heaven, about the temple, the sacred marriage. The New Year's rite always revolved around the sacred marriage of the king and queen, and that's what blessed the land. So we have so much to these 13 verses here in these two places in the Bible. It's given me pause, and it's made me think a little bit more about some of the dimensions of love that we may not consider, and about how wisdom does visit those who search for her, and how wisdom makes a man more beautiful, and how a woman is made more beautiful with this equal opposite as well. For whatever it's worth, that's our love story. I was going to talk a lot about the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon. It's said that this came from this interaction of the Queen of Sheba, that it's a ritual, that there's more to it than we believe. I've quoted Rabbi Ben Akiva, who said, "The whole world is not worth the day on which the Song of Songs was written. For all scriptures are holy, but the Song of Songs is holiest of all." In Origen of Alexandria also has an interesting quote about the Song of Songs, and I want to read you the fuller quotation that I can get. "Blessed too is he who enters holy places, but far more blessed the man who enters the Holy of Holies. Blessed likewise is he who understands songs and sings them, but much more blessed is he who sings the Song of Songs. And as the man who enters holy places still needs much to make him able to enter the Holy of Holies, so also it is hard to find a man competent to scale the heights of the Song of Songs, even though he has traversed all the songs in Scripture." That's from his first homily, the first homily. Well, that tells me the Song of Songs has a lot to it. There were 4 copies of the Song of Songs found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'll just close with this last idea about it. Again, there's much to it, and I feel like our world is so hypersexualized or hyposexualized, meaning we've got so much pornography and all these things that tend to really overstate the importance of the act in the sense of it just being an act. And then we don't have healthy conversations about good divine sexuality either on the other end. And so I'm not sure I'm going to get into that today, but please know that that's part of your makeup. That's part of who you are as a replica of the gods. And this divine marriage, this hieros gamos, this new life that's brought to the kingdom is part of this. And so I don't think you can divorce yourself from it. Tremper Longman III, who's a conservative Christian Bible scholar, said, "The Song of Songs is a passionate, sensuous love poem that reminds us that God is interested in more than just our brains and our spirits. He wants us to enjoy our bodies. It reminds us that we are not merely a soul encased in a body, but whole persons made in God's image." Well, certainly I don't want to influence you in a way that you don't want to be influenced, but there's too much about the Song of Songs anciently for it to be discarded. During the feast day of St. Mary Magdalene, they read from the Song of Songs, chapter 3, about how the bride seeks the one whom her heart loves. I believe Mary Magdalene really is the bride in the Song of Songs, and Jesus Christ is the bridegroom. It's also compared to the Lord and his church. And we'll close with this. "My soul is thirsting for you, O Lord my God. O God, you are my God whom I seek. For you my flesh pines, and my soul thirsts like the earth, parched, lifeless, and without water. My soul is thirsting for you, O Lord my God. Thus have I gazed toward you in the sanctuary to see your power and your glory. For your kindness is greater good than life. My lips shall glorify you. My soul is thirsting for you, O Lord my God. Thus will I bless you while I live, lifting up my hands. I will call upon your name. As with the riches of a banquet shall my soul be satisfied, and with exultant lips my mouth shall praise you. My soul is thirsting for you, O Lord my God, you are my help. And in the shadow of your wings I shout for joy. My soul clings fast to you, your right hand upholds me. My soul is thirsting for you, O Lord my God." Maybe there's some beautiful part of this love story that applies to you, or that will give you some insight into how you can deepen your relationships or deepen your relationship with the Lord and with the Elohim. Wisdom does delight to bless and make happy those who search for her. And I think Solomon is such a beautiful example of how that happens. And this interaction with the Queen of Sheba is one for the ages, my friends. And hopefully it's given you something to think about. And with that, I wish you, well, love and light.
Thank you for joining us for Reflecting Light with Mandy Green. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a good rating and share it with your friends. And remember, your light makes the world a brighter place. Share it.